Hello and welcome to Indian Standard Time. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's phone call to Nawaz Sharif, his counterpart in Pakistan, on the eve of the Cricket World Cup has reopened prospects for dialogue with Pakistan, between India and Pakistan. To look at what prospects exist between the two countries, to pick up the threads of their suspended dialogue process, and also to review the internal situation in Pakistan, we have with us today a very special guest, Najam Sethi, editor of Friday Times, senior anchor, leading anchor with Geo TV, former Chief Minister of Punjab, the Pakistani province of Punjab. Welcome to IST.
Thanks, Siddharth.
Najam, if I can start with a review of Pakistan's internal situation, because at least from the Indian point of view, much depends on where Pakistan is headed and whether Pakistan has the capacity, the Pakistani government has the capacity to take the dialogue process forward with India. The terrible massacre in Peshawar of school children, I think shook many people on this side. It was a reminder of the tragedies that have struck Pakistan, the fact that Pakistan itself is a victim of terror. And it also seemed to bring about a fundamental reassessment of Pakistan's own attitude towards these groups. We saw an outpouring of anger on the part of Pakistani civil society. We saw statements from the Prime Minister, from Pakistani military saying that we will fight terror with the new resolve. To what extent has the Peshawar incident really been a turning point in Pakistan's own war against terror?
Thank you, Siddharth. Yes, I think the Peshawar incident was a catalyst. It brought all the key players together on one page, as it were. The most important thing about Peshawar was that although the army under its new chief was ready to go to war against the Taliban, the Prime Minister, his party, was reluctant to abandon the prospects of negotiating with them. And that was only for one reason, because Imran Khan, his key challenger, his position on the Taliban was that they were misguided Muslims and that to wage war against them would be wrong. And Imran Khan is a very popular leader in Pakistan, with the result that there was no consensus in civil society about what to do. The army was very clear under the new chief that they had to fight this internal threat. General Kiani earlier on had said that this was an existential threat, far more potent than any external threat to Pakistan, implying that if India had been the external threat, well, now this was far more potent. But he didn't have the courage to start the war against the Taliban because he knew the civilians would not give the army full backing. This army chief put a lot of pressure on Nawaz Sharif. He wanted to get on with it. His soldiers were suffering. They were being butchered in those areas. The security forces were being attacked, and yet the civilians weren't coming together. And the reason Nawaz Sharif was reluctant was because he didn't want to hand over this particular paradigm, as it were, to Imran Khan. But Imran Khan was thrown off to the back foot after the Peshawar incident. And there was a lot of criticism of Imran for not changing his position on the Taliban, and he was compelled to do so. The minute Imran changed his position, reversed his position on the Taliban and said, yes, these are barbarians, we need to fight them, this is our war, this is not America's war, then there was a total consensus in civil society. And that is when the Prime Minister then ordered the army to move in. And since then, there's been no looking back, frankly.
But Zarb-e-Azb, the action in North Waziristan, it predates all of this. I mean, wasn't that also meant to be a do-or-die operation against the TTP?
Yes, it doesn't predate it in the sense that they did go ahead with it. There were other incidents, but Imran was still in opposition. Okay. And the Prime Minister was half-heartedly involved. But I think after this thing, they've gone against the Taliban with a bang. And not only that, they've now activated a new action plan for terrorism, which the ownership of which is with the civilians, which is what the army always wanted to do. They wanted the civilians to take ownership of the war, and the civilians are reluctant to do so for a host of reasons, as I've explained. Now the army and the civilians are on the same page. The army is going hammer and tongue against them. Civilians have agreed to set up military courts, something they were reluctant to do because they had to amend the constitution for this. To bring everybody on the same page to amend the constitution was not an easy task, but they went ahead and did it. And now there are nearly 100 cases now which have been given to the military courts. Over and above that, the Pakistan Protection Ordinance, again a very Herculean ordinance to stop terrorism, that has been brought in place. So now the legal structure is moving apace with the physical onslaught.
Are the military courts a double-edged sword for democracy in Pakistan?
Absolutely. I mean, it was everybody objected to them because we thought that one day these courts could be used against civilians as well who are not terrorists, right, because that has happened in the past. But I think two things have happened. Number one, they are time barred. After 2 years, they will cease to exist. Number two, the government has to hand over cases to the military. The military can't just go and arrest somebody and decide to try them. So now you seek the approval of the government. The government sends cases to the military courts. So that is why the politicians have said, all right, let's go ahead and do this.
We saw scenes from Peshawar of the parents of these children protesting when Imran Khan tried to visit. To what extent do you think this incident and the civil society reaction has damaged Imran Khan politically? Or does he still remain, at least by assessments that we see, overwhelmingly popular leader in Pakistan?
No, Imran Khan is the Teflon man. Nothing sticks to him. You can throw whatever you like at him, it doesn't stick. His supporters are youthful and passionate. They believe in him. He can't do any wrong. Having said that, Imran has had to shift his positions. He was trying to destabilize the government. In fact, it was argued that he was playing footsie with elements in the military and intelligence services to try and overthrow the government and so on. But all that is now on a back burner. Imran has had to call off his dharnas and his protests because the opinion in civil society and overwhelmingly in the media is we need to be together. This is no time to destabilize and overthrow each other. We need to show a united front against the common enemy. And unless we tackle that, it's not going to be resolved. Having said that, so in that sense, Imran has been pushed back. A lot of people are disappointed by his quote-unquote opportunism. They felt that his dharna was preconceived notion. He was conspiring. He had no business doing that. And then he called it off just like that when it seemed to have petered out.
He got married somewhere along the line.
Yes, and then in between he got married, which didn't go down well at all because it happened at a time when the nation was mourning. And this was no time to celebrate an engagement or a marriage. So yes, I think there's been a dent in his popularity. But I think the proof of the pudding will be when the local elections take place. And the government in Punjab is fearful of holding local elections because it thinks Imran might get a lot of votes which would undermine the Punjab provincial government, which is the Nawaz Sharif's government. And so we still have to wait and see. But my sense is Imran is still a very potent force in Pakistan.
Like many people here, I was also struck by the outpouring of anger in Pakistan after the Peshawar incident. But I was recently at a conference in Islamabad where senior Pakistani journalists compared the Pakistani reaction, which was different and notable from the past, with the outpouring of national grief in France after journalists were killed in the Charlie Hebdo office. And he made the observation that maybe the Peshawar moment has passed. Is that too pessimistic a reading? Do you think people of Pakistan are going to continue to demand that their government and their military take action against terrorists of all stripes?
No, I think that moment has not passed. That moment was a milestone. You cannot expect an outpouring on the streets of millions of people against this as in France. France is a highly developed civil society. In countries like Pakistan, unless political parties mobilize people for something, there are very few demonstrations which are spontaneous or civil society oriented. At best, civil society can muster 500 people at a demonstration, which is an issue-oriented demonstration. So that, I think...
And there was some pretty strong protests outside the Lal Masjid this time.
Yes, well, I mean, again, 500 people or 1,000 people is a lot of people because to protest outside a mosque and to say that the mosque Maulvi is a terrorist is unheard of in Pakistan because of the fear factor. But I think people have overcome much of that fear because now they realize that the intelligence services and army, which is really the organs of the state, in a sense no longer support these people. Because earlier on, this assumption was that they were non-state actors that were supported by them for one reason or another. Now the assessment is that, okay, we can come out and demonstrate and we know that the intelligence agencies will not be acting against us.
We are quite familiar here with Pakistan's English language newspapers. Many of us read them regularly. We don't see Pakistani news channels, but on my last visit, caught a smattering. There were remnants of some conspiracy theorizing about the Peshawar attack, कि जी America ने किया, etc., etc. Is this still, does one hear this chatter in the Urdu printed press, for example, in the press, for example, or is this really completely a fringe?
I know it is totally a fringe element that does this, and they have to do it. That's their way of livelihood.
Right. So it has no traction in terms of wider civil society?
No, but it doesn't have a significant traction. But let me also say this, that there is a history to such a narrative, that anything that goes wrong in Pakistan, there's an Indian hand in it, or there's an American hand in it. And there's a lot of anti-Americanism in Pakistan. And there is a sense of the CIA is omnipotent. Not a leaf moves in Pakistan without the CIA, which is all nonsense.
Right.
That's not the way it is. But that is the conspiracy theory. And the conspiracy theories flourish in countries where there's a lot of impotent rage. And I think that is what characterizes the situation. But rationality and facts are now becoming more and more important in the discourse in Pakistan.
Right.
And the reason for that is that civil society and especially the media tend to follow, quote unquote, the most patriotic force in the country, which of course is the army.
Right.
So now that the army is changing its line, as it were, a lot of people have no problems following that line.
Right.
I'm only alarmed by one new development. You may have heard about it. The DG ISPR, the spokesman of the military, has for the first time, in quite an unprecedented manner, accused India of financing elements of the Taliban. I think this is they have always hinted at things like this, but they've never come out with it. And they've done that because my sense is they're feeling a great deal of frustration, and the deadlock between India and Pakistan, and they don't want the border hotted up.
Right.
They want to be free to tackle the Taliban. So they're urging the Prime Minister to get on and build the bridges that need to be built. And whenever something like this happens, when talks get called off and things like that, there's a sense of alarm and frustration that, okay, we have now changed, we are now changing. There's an attempt to change the paradigm here. This is what India has always wanted. We understand it now, we want to do it, and you're not being terribly helpful.
Right, right. On that point, I'll take a break. When we come back, we will review the state of India-Pakistan relations in the light of what Najam has been saying. Stay with us. Welcome back to IST. Najam, you mentioned the ISPR statement, and I wanted to pick up on something and connect that to General Sharif's statement right after the Peshawar attack, when he said that there'll be no more good Taliban, no more bad Taliban, we're going to fight against all these guys. The concern in India is that Pakistan's war on terror will remain confined to groups that, like the TTP, which are targeting the Pakistani state. But a blind eye will continue to be turned towards groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba that are targeting India. Do you foresee is there any prospect for change in that line of the Pakistani state? Or do you think Peshawar and subsequent developments may actually push the Pakistani government and military into taking action against these groups?
The good Taliban, bad Taliban statement refers to the good Taliban being originally the Haqqani network and the Afghan Taliban. The bad Taliban being the Pakistani Taliban who were attacking the Pakistani state. That statement does not reflect on the Pakistani state's or the military's relationship with the jihadi groups. So we have to split this question into two parts. As far as the good Taliban, bad Taliban part is concerned, they are now attacking the bad Taliban, and they're telling the good Taliban that if you do not now come to the table with Ashraf Ghani's new government in Afghanistan, we will no longer be able to keep you and host you, and we will have to act against you because of your nexus, not just with the remnants or the developing IS sections, but also the Pakistani Taliban, because there's a nexus with all these Taliban groups. So there is a veiled threat to the good Taliban that stop your nexus with the bad Taliban, and B, get ready to negotiate because we are no longer going to help you in Afghanistan. So I think that part I buy. Now we come to the question of their attitude towards the jihadi groups.
The anti-India groups.
The so-called anti-India groups, and the ones who in the past have been involved in promoting jihad in Kashmir and so on. I think the attitude there is that, first of all, my sense is they've sent a message to these groups: keep your head down. There should be no incident that creates a problem for us. We want to start building our fences with India, and we want to try and find solutions to Kashmir, and we don't want you creating difficulties. And that message has gone down, and I think it's gone loud and clear. Now, what happens when you send these messages, because Musharraf also sent such a message in the mid-2000s when he started his dialogue with India, that radical elements from within these groups break away. And the first thing they did was they attacked Musharraf, they tried to kill him. And then many of them who didn't want to buy this line because they'd been reared on a completely different way of thinking, ended up joining the Pakistani Taliban, and they became the Punjabi Taliban, and which we are now fighting. So the core jihadi group that listens to the army is still very much alive, but they've been told, can you transform yourself into social welfare groups? We know that there are thousands of militants who've been trained. You can't press a button and just knock them out, nor can the state take them on in any sense, because then there will be total chaos. There might even be people within the state apparatus who don't agree with this policy. This is a step-by-step thing. It works in tandem with development and progress of peace with India. But in the meanwhile, they are to be restrained from creating any difficulties or any problems.
I think that sequencing, where you reserve immediate action against groups that are targeting you, and you try to put the anti-India groups on a leash pending action, hopefully against them in the future, seems logical and I think maybe acceptable to the Indian leadership. The problem arises when you have something like what we saw in the Bombay case. Prime Minister Modi calls up Nawaz Sharif after the Peshawar attack, and within a day or two you have Lakhvi, who is the prime accused, getting bail. How does that happen?
Yes, well, I mean, you know, when I heard the news of Lakhvi's bail, I was appalled and shocked. And of course, the first thing I did was I contacted higher-ups in government to find out what the hell was going on. And I can tell you this, they were angry, outraged, appalled that the two judges of the Islamabad High Court had done this. The background to these judges is that they, one of them certainly was a great sympathizer of such people in the past. And lawyers become judges, and so in the due process. And now governments don't appoint judges, judges appoint themselves under the new amendments. So the government then pulled out all the stops. The judges, to try and keep him behind bars. The judges were not persuaded. The government then used another law to keep him in, which is the maintenance of public order. The judges said, you are trying to thwart the course of justice. We will not accept this. Then the government actually went to the Supreme Court and basically told the Supreme Court that this man cannot be released. This man he will impinge on foreign policy, especially in the neighborhood, and we are trying to make paradigm changes, and there is no way that this man can be released. They actually said this. I was shocked that they actually said this will ruin our position vis-a-vis India and so on. So they said that. And the judges turned around and said, okay, we will ask the Islamabad High Court to give you a chance to be heard again. So the case went back. And in the meanwhile, they said this man will remain behind bars. So the government pulled out the stops. They said this man cannot be released. It would be a disaster for our foreign policy. The point I'm making is
you think the government had the backing of the Pakistani military in its endeavor to keep this guy behind bars?
100%.
Okay.
The point I'm making is that our judicial system has gone from being a handmaiden of the executive to becoming almost an anarchist independent force. And there are many conservative elements. For example, an ex-Chief Justice of the Lahore High Court is defending the murderer of Salman Taseer, who is a self-confessed murderer.
Right.
So, you have this sort of situation where the judiciary has been radicalized in a religious sense in the last 20 years as well. So we have to deal with rogue elements who do not buy the new paradigm changes that are ostensibly in place now.
Right. You know, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi called off the dialogue with Pakistan, foreign secretaries were going to meet last year, the reason cited was Pakistan meeting with the Hurriyat. But other reasons that were cited were that, what's the point of talking right now when Nawaz Sharif has his back to the wall? You have Imran Khan and Tahirul Qadri's agitation. You have Nawaz Sharif weakened vis-a-vis the military. Can he deliver on anything that we may agree about? How would you assess, as an analyst in Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif's capacity to respond to any peace overtures or dialogue overtures from India? Were they to be made?
Yeah, I think Nawaz Sharif actually staked a lot of his political longevity on building peace with India. There were elements in the Pakistani Foreign Office and in the new security establishment which basically said to him, don't go so fast.
So the visit he made for Prime Minister Modi's inauguration was controversial back home?
Back home, there were elements who advised him, on paper as it were, that first they said there's no need to go. This is a Raj. The Indian Prime Minister is trying to emulate the great viceroys and so on and so forth. There's no need to pay obeisance or homage. The Bangladeshis are not sending somebody. They're sending somebody else. We'll do the same. Nawaz said no. Then he was told that, all right, if you have to go, go. But attend the banquet and come back the same day. Do not stay overnight for any bilaterals. Bilaterals should be sequential and there should be some talk before that. And Nawaz said no. He overruled everybody. And he went. And despite a statement by the then Indian Foreign Secretary, which was very provocative the following day,
at a press conference,
Nawaz kept his cool. But people in Pakistan were already wagging their tongues and saying, we told you so. However, he managed to survive. In that sense, the announcement of the talks in August seemed to suggest that he had made some headway. And then the cancellation came as a very, very big blow. Most people thought, the Indian Prime Minister is being true to his colors. This is what we expected from a hardliner. They are not to be trusted, blah, 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 blah. And so there were a lot of people who said, we told you so, we told you so. So Nawaz felt a little humiliated and a little belittled. Then I think he began to understand that certain domestic political reasons may have been behind it. And you've now pointed to an interesting factor, which is that maybe the Indians at that time felt that talking to Nawaz at a time when his own position seemed to be a little unstable might have been a factor. But my own sense is that Kashmir probably was a factor. There was an attempt to show that there was a discontinuity between the governments of the past in India and this current government in terms of policies. And so they decided, okay, let's not go ahead right now. We'll have many opportunities to get back on track. And at least that was my assessment, and I said as much at that time. I said, I think domestic politics has impinged. This is not a paradigm change. He's not going to be true to his colors as predicted. If within 3 months they will be back on track in one way or another, they'll find ways and means of doing so. And in my meetings with the Pakistani Prime Minister, I found him remarkably calm after a while. He was upset, agitated first. Then in the recent last month or so, he's been pretty calm. And he obviously has not answered my questions, but his smile tells me all that, don't worry, everything's under control. We're going to get back on track.
And domestically, would it be fair to say that Nawaz Sharif is stronger today politically than he was, say, in August or September last year?
Yes, I think so. He's stabilized. Imran has backed off. In a sense, he's also been exposed. The earlier elements in the intelligence agencies that were egging on Imran and to try and restabilize Nawaz for various reasons have all been they have been retired. The new army chief is now firmly in control. He had inherited a cabinet of corps commanders that was not of his own choosing. He's now got half his own men in there. So I think he's in control, and he's really laying down this agenda for war against terror. And in a sense, the Prime Minister is having to keep pace with him.
Right. Now, the ISPR statement alleging Indian interference, Indian support for the Taliban on the one hand, and the enticing prospect of the Indian Foreign Minister going to Islamabad and in a way trying to pick up the threads of the dialogue. Two contradictory trends. Which do you think is going to prevail?
No, I think the ISPR statement is an expression of frustration.
Okay.
In the sense that why aren't things moving on? Why are the Indians dragging their feet? Let's get on with it. Let's start talking about these issues. Because I think for the first time, the Pakistani military really wants to talk about these issues.
The perception here is actually the opposite. We look at the ceasefire violations, for example, for which, to my mind, I haven't found any rational explanation, either on your side or our side, quite frankly. But there is a view here that that this is a reflection of the Pakistani military's desire to push infiltration and muddy the waters.
No, I think the realization there is that the mood in Kashmir has changed in the last 10 years. And that the best thing that Pakistan can do is support the aspirations of the democratically elected forces of Kashmir and let the process now be a long-term process of reconciliation. There can be no short-term immediate settlements that are entirely tilted in favor of Pakistan. That, I think, Musharraf's era demonstrated that, and that is a legacy that is now firmly entrenched.
The election in Jammu and Kashmir, the turnout, the result, was that an eye-opener for many people in Pakistan?
I think
or is there still an air of cynicism about this exercise?
No, not at all. I think the argument there was that if there is an attempt by for the Muslims of Kashmir to try and boycott the elections, that might actually be negative, have negative consequences. So it's best to counter the BJP's attempt to seize Kashmir electorally by coming out in mass numbers and trying to resist this. And I think the current situation in Kashmir, my sense is that the negotiations between the PDP and the BJP, if they succeed, and they have to succeed really for Kashmir to move on, will presage at least an attempt to resolve certain issues, even though they may take some time to resolve.
Looking ahead, Jammu and Kashmir, Siachen, these are all complex issues. They've defied easy resolution for the past several decades. There are what diplomats like to call low-hanging fruit that are available to be plucked, trade, for example. Do you think it's possible that Pakistan might be willing to move ahead if India agrees to some of Pakistan's requests on non-tariff barriers, that the Sabse Pasandida Mulk or the non-discriminatory market access might come through finally?
No, I mean, until 5 years ago, we all thought that Siachen and Sir Creek were low-hanging fruits. But after Kargil, the Indian position has changed on these. And so they're no longer low-hanging fruits. I don't expect any settlement on them unless there is a comprehensive settlement on Kashmir. They are now going to be part of a different paradigm. Trade is now the low-hanging fruit in the sense that this was always India's demand. Let's start trading, and then we can talk about that. Will build trust and vested interest in both countries, and then we can start talking about the more intractable issues. Pakistan's problem was that no, trade will come right at the end. Right. Why? Because it's a much more win situation for you than it is for us. So instead of win-win both sides, our argument was you win more than we do, so no, we are not going to do this. Now under Nawaz Sharif, first under Zardari and then under Nawaz Sharif, the army has withdrawn its objection to trade. Opening up trade with India. And both Zardari went ahead with it, and then when Nawaz came in, he picked up the thread and he went ahead with it. And I think my sense is that they would have signed with the Manmohan Singh government. But I think everything was sorted out, including some of the thorny issues that you talk about. Right. And my sense is the Indians were prepared to make more concessions that we imagined they might on some of the non-tariff barriers and so on. And so it was about to be, the deal was about to be done. I was talking to Dr. Manmohan Singh about 2-3 weeks ago here in Delhi, and he said I was ready to fly to Islamabad because this would have been a good clinching act. But Nawaz Sharif was advised, and he took the advice, that the Congress was going to lose, BJP was coming in. If you have to do something like this, do it with the new government. It will be a good starting point. And I think this was conveyed to interlocutors who came to Pakistan ostensibly on behalf of the BJP, although the BJP said we have nothing to do with them, but that was the impression they gave. Right. The messages were sent back, we are not going to sign, we will sign with you. Right. So I think my sense is that as soon as we get back on track, one of the first things that will happen in the next 12 months is that we will sign the trade agreement.
Well, Najam, you know and I know from long experience that the road to normalization is a difficult and tortuous one. Yes. But on that note, let's hope things do progress. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.